So it's an interesting conversation today, and one that actually popped over my head around about 10 days ago, maybe 7 days ago, whatever the flub it was, but it absolutely kicked into the gear 24 hours previous to me saying these words. So now I'm really going to sit down and say them. Because I get really confused sometimes by some of the critiques that people have for pro wrestling. As I always say, you're allowed to think whatever the flub you want. That is the beauty of this life we do live in. But after CM Punk got thrown through a table when he was, well, taking on John Cena, I guess, and John Cena wanted to cut a pipe bomb promo. And yesterday when Blake Christian decided he was going to walk the ropes, Will Ospreay essentially had to oversell. I would say that is the similarities here. The oversell of Punk and Will Ospreay. You always get people going, well, that looked really fake and that doesn't make any sense. And I don't understand what is happening here. Well, I can tell you, right? I'm going to make you very sad. I do apologize. Punk laid there that entire time because he wanted to create the effect that he couldn't attack John Cena, so John Cena could say these words. And Will Ospreay did that because before the match, they had decided that Blake Christian was going to walk around the ring and do an arm drag, and they thought it would look cool. Now, I am not saying that if you're into the more serious side of pro wrestling, you can't get mad at this, or you can't roll your eye at this, or you can't go and complain on the internet and say, this is not the type of wrestling for me. Totally get it, totally understand it. There's elements of wrestling that aren't for me either that I'll talk about as and when they do come up. But to try and extinguish it from all of sports entertainment, from all of professional wrestling, that's where I kind of draw the line. Because, and we did touch on this yesterday, so apologies if you do watch all of my videos, but I just think we are going away from what makes wrestling so damn great. And I understand that I'm a big advocate for goofy wrestling for life, which absolutely ties into this territory, where you can do whatever the flub you want and nobody cares. But to get rid of that, I just think would make wrestling so boring. Let's say we woke up tomorrow and you had the genie, right? You're Aladdin, the genie in the lamp, and you wish for all these wonderful things. On the third one, you say, I only want there to be one type of wrestling, the wrestling where when I do suspend my disbelief, I have no idea whether what I'm seeing is real or not real. I think within about 6 months, you would be absolutely tired of pro wrestling, because think of all the things that you couldn't do. Now, I'm getting a little bit flickety-wickety here. I understand that, but you have to get rid of the Irish whip. Can't Irish whip someone. Today, go out on the street and make sure it's a friend, not someone you don't know, and say, I'm going to throw you from one corner to the next, but don't help me literally do what you would do in the real world. They will stop about 2 feet away from you, and that'll be that. You can only throw them as much as your strength. They certainly won't run into the ropes and ping back at you, so that's God. Can't do a DDT, can't do a body slam, unless you're super duper strong. Now, that is me taking it to the nth degree. But even if we do storylines, let's take two that are going on right now. So we'll go with Bill Goldberg versus Gunther, right? Bill Goldberg, 37 million years ago, had a good old undefeated streak. And after Gunther insulted his family at whatever the hell that show was, he is coming back for one last ride where he wants to win the world championship. Now, if we were going to put this once again in the real world, no one is going to sign off a 58-year-old man having a competitive match against Gunther, who was what, late 30s, maybe 40 at a push, but essentially in his physical prime. So that would probably have to go too. On the other side, you have John Moxley, who was locked a world championship in a briefcase and essentially goes around with a bunch of criminals trying to choke people. That's what he did to Hangman Adam Page, again, only 24 hours ago, and there were no police, there were no cops, and it just kind of happened. That all has to go too, right? You have to throw it all out of the window. Now, I understand. People were saying that's not what we're talking about, Simon. We're talking about the moves, like when there's a group of people on the outside of the ring and they are just waiting for somebody to dive on them. But who cares, man? Why would you want to get rid of that? We all know what's going on. Kayfabe never truly existed. Like, even if you go back to 1950s, the audience weren't dumb. They knew what was on the up and up. And if you really do want to go out there and find a type of pro wrestling that tries to present itself to you as legitimately as possible, it exists. But if you also want dumb wrestling, where sometimes people have guns and do all kinds of crazy things, that is there as well. And that, to me, is the beauty of pro wrestling. And that's where my Repo Man love comes from. I've told this story 1,000 times. I'll tell it 1,001. It was kind of the realization that Barry Darson had gone, okay, the demolition gimmick is dead. What else can I do? Well, hey, Vince McMahon, I'd like to be a man that repossesses things and also, for some reason, is a wrestler. But a Repo Man possesses things based on a company that said you have to go and repossess this thing because this person owes this money, whereas Repo Man was just a thief. He's just stealing nonsense and using his job as a cover-up and doing a terrible job as well. Like, he sold Macho Man Randy Savage's hat, and I think Macho Man was still mad about that for a good decade. That is the dumbest thing ever. It is so silly. It is so stupid. If you go and tell that to somebody who doesn't watch wrestling, they'll look at you like, I don't think I want to be your friend anymore. But it's awesome. And it's magical. It's like the Royal Rumble elimination where 2 feet have to touch the floor, and even when you're eliminated, you can get back in and do a bunch of crazy things. If you get knocked out of any kind of tournament in sports, you're not allowed to just come back and knock somebody else out. And the officials go, well, I suppose he does have to go. I just think it's wonderful, and I just think it's fun. And it's the thing that got me locked in to pro wrestling to begin with. There was an Orange Cassidy Outrunners match from 2024 when it was all about the Outrunners trying to drop an elbow on Orange Cassidy, and it is some of the most fun I've ever had. I put it on my 10 best matches of the year list because I broke it down into what entertains me, but that was all over the place. That was goofy wrestling for life. Let's shout out the MXM collection, Mansoor and Marseille, who do this kind of thing all of the time, right? That's basically their entire existence in pro wrestling, is to do dumb stuff to try and make you laugh, and then, yeah, sure, we'll have something that embodies a competitive match, but ultimately they just want to make you smile, and they just want to make you feel warm and fuzzy in your tum-tum, and that's kind of the same with dives. Like, I'm not saying that these people shouldn't sort of maybe try and be a bit more nuanced with the way that they do it. But at the same time, if that's the only way to do it, I don't want it to be taken away forever, because I just think that's going to end up with this horrible product that's lame and a little bit boring. If anything, let's continue to push the boundaries of what we can do athletically or personality-wise or emotionally-wise. There has to be lines here. I don't want it to be offensive. I don't want to get too gratuitous. Like, somebody can't stand there and go, jump at me, Will, jump at me. Because you can exaggerate these things. That's certainly not what I want. Sometimes you're watching these shows and you see somebody do a crazy dive and thousands of people lose their brain. Now, I understand it's a television product as well, so sometimes you can see the magic, but there's audiences all over the shop watching it in different ways, and if 20,000 people in an arena pop for a dive, well, you probably did the right thing. And sometimes they don't pop for a dive. It's not necessarily because you took too long, because there was a bunch of people waiting. You just didn't give the fans what they wanted, and that's what wrestling should come down to. I did a move, I got a reaction, great. I cut a promo, I got a reaction, great. I hit this emotional gland and people went, oh my gosh, I can't believe it, great. If there's silence or people don't understand you, your character is all over the place, that's where the effort should go, and that's where the work should go. Look at someone like Santino Marella that would put a sock on his hand, or a cobra on his hand. Mick Foley used a sock, but it's basically a cobra sock, and smack people right in the jawline or the neck or whatever. Remember when JTG sold it? He had somewhat of a conniption. That is the kind of thing that I want more than anything. And this also gets into a whole conversation about selling versus bumping, I suppose. There is a huge difference. Bumping is when you take something and throw yourself around and look awesome doing it. Selling is when you act like a body part is hurt or like you're in actual trouble and you connect to that emotional side of the audience. But you need all of those things. Like Dolph Ziggler was a tremendous bumper, and some of the ways that he reacted to moves, absolute nonsense. Like when RVD gets spiked on his head. That would never happen. If you were walking down the street and someone did grab you and plant you into the floor, you would crack your brain open and you would cry like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. But it just made him stand out. And why did it make him stand out? Because the fans saw that and they said to themselves, well, I've never seen that before. That's the coolest thing ever. You could even bring it in there with his, I always get confused with his damn stupid moves, the Van Terminator or the Van Daminator, the one where he did coast to coast. I don't want to call it that because that's what Shane McMahon called it, when he took it off RVD. But the dude sometimes would be laying in that teen of the turnbuckle for ages because RVD had to go to the other side of the ring, climb up and jump over to it, because that is just the art form that professional wrestling is. When it comes to real sports, the reason people love them so much is because you never know what the drama is going to be. Sometimes it's going to be exciting and sometimes it's not. It's one of the reasons Vince McMahon wasn't worried about UFC, which he was totally wrong, because he was like, we get to control the outcome of our fights, they don't, so sometimes it's going to be boring. And that's not always true for pro wrestling either. Like, go to 2019 WWE, some of the worst wrestling you'll ever see in the existence of the planet, but the creativity has to be there and nothing should ever be off the table. When you have a bunch of guys and girls backstage with the booker or the writer or the agent, the producer or whoever, and you get to sit down and decide what this match is going to be, what this battle royal is going to be, what this ladder match is going to be, you shouldn't start saying, well, I don't really want to do that because it's not going to make much sense in the grand scheme of things. No, you do it, you go out there, and then you take the feedback in real time. Like, so many people are like, why is wrestling the best thing ever? John Cena spoke about this the other day. He said the reason he prefers wrestling over acting is because of the real-time feedback. He's out there, he's hearing them, he knows what works, what doesn't work, whereas acting, as brilliant as it is for him, is on a set, it's very self-contained, it's very quiet, and you do get a certain amount of adrenaline from it, but it's a completely different type of adrenaline. And that's always what you should be trying to get, that kind of reaction, that kind of a noise, because not only does it charge the energy of a match, it charges the energy of the performers, and usually makes makes it feel like a bigger deal. Like, wrestling is all smoke and mirrors, no matter what it is. Go and watch Hulk Hogan versus The Rock from WrestleMania 18 with no sound on. And it's a completely different match with sound. Some people call it the best match of all time. So if you think you can walk around the ring ropes and get a reaction, but somebody has to hold you for a while, do it. If you want to recreate that pipe bomb from 2011, but CM Punk's going to have to pretend to be dead in a table, do it. What benefit would it have been if CM Punk had started getting up and cut John Cena up? Now, unless you planned it that way, sure, a couple of people would have been like, well, that made perfect sense. I don't want sense. When you watch a movie, sometimes people don't go to the toilet. Sometimes people don't eat. And if you really want to get to those levels of being, I don't know, specific, be like, oh, why wouldn't he be doing that? You perfectly can. But I just think you're taking this creative endeavor that you're meant to love so much and you're putting it in such a niche, you're probably never going to be satisfied anyway. And if it's not for you, to go back to my original point, you don't have to watch it, you don't have to enjoy it. Of course, you can shout about it. Sometimes people say, I'm saying not to do that. Absolutely not. You should go crazy. But you could probably make the argument that in terms of what we can do in front of a camera, in front of thousands of people, wrestling is the number one thing when it comes to creativity, because nothing is off the table. You can go down there and lay down and just roll into each other over and over again, should you so wish. Somebody can punch you and you land on your head and they pin you right away. Somebody can punch you and you totally no-sell it. Someone can punch you and you can pretend your nose is broken. This just goes on and on and on and on and on. And that is why I love it so much. It's why I thought that Blake Christian thing was hilarious. He quite clearly knew what he was doing. Go and watch it again and watch his mannerisms. And watch Will Ospreay too. Genuinely thought it was amusing. That's why I don't care. Who was the last one to do it? Somebody climbed the rope. It's in one of those party matches that AEW does. And you could see the cluster forming. I know Jim Ross doesn't like this at all, but Jim Ross is an old school kind of a guy and he wants to see those threads. He doesn't want to see the business being exposed, if we want to use the professional terms. And I remember that party match was one of the funnest things I saw for that week in my professional wrestling life, of course over at What Culture Wrestling and over here too. And there's so many people like, oh man, it was rubbish because I saw the cluster coming together and I knew all of this stuff was fake. You know, I don't use the word fake anyway, but we know what this is. We understand that it's a work that is predetermined, it's not entirely on the up and up. And I get it if you want to make sure all the magic is totally hidden, but that doesn't mean I think that we shouldn't do it anymore. It has produced so many wonderful things, like Rusev Day. It's just a thing that pops in my head. What the flub is Rusev Day? It doesn't make any sense, but somehow we turned it into this thing. And the only reason it wasn't any bigger is because WWE and Vince McMahon went and smashed it down so much. I talked about Santino Marella that would walk around doing the most ridiculous things for no apparent reason. When Batista retired, when he pretended he was in a wheelchair. When Chris Jericho got dragged away when he's in WWE. We didn't see him for 2 years or whatever it was. There's all these just amazing, wonderful things that you can do. Even The Undertaker throwing Mankind off the top of the Hell in a Cell. If that was the real world, the cops would have been out there and they would have dragged his ass away. And Mick Foley never would have let that happen. He would have wiggled and he would have jiggled. Now, the reason it was so visceral and so real, quote unquote, is because it's the most terrifying thing we've ever seen. And of course, somebody doing a big old dive onto a pile of people just tells you, well, they planned that. But it just doesn't bother me. And you know what? Maybe it should. Maybe I am part of the problem. But it's in those instances, I suppose, when the mask is pulled down, when the magic does go away, when you can see behind the curtain. I'm like, man, this professional wrestling thing is the greatest thing of all time. And of course, you're allowed your thoughts, even if you haven't done a wrestling match yourself. But as a man that does wrestle most weekends, when you see people doing it at the top of their craft and the speed and the timing and some of the dives that they do, you're like, how the flub are you doing this to begin with? How do you not hurt yourself, even if there are 42 people down there to catch you? Like a suicide dive, the most basic of all the dives, a tope, is absolutely terrifying because you're putting your life in somebody else's hand. And if we want to break it down to the reason we are doing it, the reason there's an army of people there to catch you is to try and break your fall. Look at the Leon Slater thing, right? TNA, which caused a right stink for the opposite reasons. He dove off the X Division stanchion or whatever you want to call it, and he basically hit the floor. If he hadn't have been a young 20-year-old and also some weird, bizarre prodigy, when it comes to pro wrestling, it could have been way worse. Somehow he just sprung back up and kept going. And ever since that, I think he's been fine, but things can go wrong. That's kind of a different conversation about how dangerous and how much should we push it. But actually, no. Because you can roll it back round with a 180 and be like, well, that's up to the professional wrestler as well. And it's up to the other people in that match. Leon, you want to go up there and climb it? Well, okay, I'll try and catch you as best I can. And you put everything in place as best as you can, and you go for it. But they all stood there waiting around. But because it went wrong, it had a different sort of tact to it, where people are like, well, they should have caught him, well, they should have caught him. And I bet you if they had caught him, everyone's always so dumb, they're just waiting around for him to jump off the damn structure to begin with. So I understand you can't win. I understand it's a vocal minority. But it's the reason reason I fell in love with pro wrestling, was the nonsense, was the silliness, was the realization that there is just no barriers to any of this. And WWE will always have their style, and AEW will always have their style. That's why I love DDT so much. They just do whatever the flub they want. They don't care. They have matches on a train. Like, how on earth do you get it? But you can't start picking and choosing. You can't say, well, that's too far, but that's not far enough. You can in your individual lives, but pro wrestling should be a blank canvas. And I think that's why even on an independent level, it is so much fun, because you find out how you're working, and sometimes you get a story and sometimes you don't, and you can just make it up as you go along if you want, or you can have an intricate plan. I did a match the other day when I was taking on someone a lot smaller than me, and so we decided, why don't you just, it was a no DQ match or something like that. There was some kind of a rule. I thought, well, just hit me in the balls over and over again. I think I hit the balls 6 times. Like, it was so dumb. And it was done for comedy. Like, it was meant to be a fun match. It was in a relatively small venue in front of a couple of hundred people. But after that match, I was sort of over the moon. I was elated because the crowd had bought into it. They had reacted. It also actually, after a while, made them go, oh my gosh, Simon Miller's going to lose because he keeps getting hit in the wham. And I'm sure somebody could have seen that and be like, Simon, why don't you just cover up your penis? Is that because that's not the story that we're trying to tell? And if you really kind of want to stretch it out, you could probably say that Will Ospreay and Swerve Strickland weren't able to warm up before their AEW match. That was part of the story, because the Young Bucks had brought it from the second half of Dynamite into the first half. So if you're not warmed up and somebody does beat you up for a little bit, maybe your HP and your MP would go down faster. You haven't got a med pack, you're out of stamina, you're out of energy. So somebody is going to whip wham blah bomb on the top rope. You're not going to be able to stop them. Whereas if you were able to warm up, all of a sudden there you go. And that's what I'm talking about. That's the secret sauce that I keep going on about. You can come up with anything that you want to make sense of professional wrestling, because none of it's real, and therefore all of it's real. And you could do it right now. Here's some homework from your bald idiot Simon Miller. Pick any wrestler that you want, any manager that you want, any promotion that you want, and any scene. It can be WrestleMania, it can have a championship, it can have a stipulation. Just craft it, man. It's why e-feds exist to this day in 2025, because you can write down any names you want. You can write down any names you want. You can write down any names you want. You can write down any moves you want. You can write down any winners you want. They could literally do whatever. Going back to that Rock versus Hulk Hogan match, if Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon had said to The Rock, listen, Rock, we are going to make you wear a baby growth. We're going to feed you milk, and you're going to go, where? I mean, The Rock would have said no, obviously, but The Rock had gone, yeah, fine, that works for me. That's what they would have done. And you want that to go away? And of course, there's been absolutely crappy things. The first that comes to mind for some reason, the Backlash 2021, the Miz versus Damian Priest advertising match with zombies. It was totally dumb. It was totally ridiculous. And it almost took this idea and threw it into the water, but thank goodness it exists. And thank goodness we got the Swamp match. And thank goodness we got the Boneyard match. And thank goodness we got the Firefly Funhouse match. And all of that stuff. WCW in the year 2000 went absolutely crazy with this, but I sometimes go back and I watch it and I laugh, especially when they hoisted Judy Bagwell up on that forklift. But then there's Viagra on the pole, which is way too far to me and I think is the dumbest thing ever. But if that's what has to exist in order for the rest of it to exist, well, I genuinely, truly, not just saying this for effect, although I kind of am, because I'm going to end the video that way, I think it's some of the best stuff that pro wrestling has to offer. Now, of course, I know this is going to kick and stink, and you can do that in the comments, and please do like the video, share the video, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Click the video on the screen to get my update from the wrestling week and me talking about something else with my stupid bald head. Otherwise, patreon.com/Simon316 if you want to join the watch-alongs and other stuff, it's only $5. Grillermind.com/Simon for 10% off all of their wares and supplements, and it ships worldwide. Simon316, come give me a follow. Simon J. Miller on TikTok, and you want to see my latest video. People got mad at me again. I can't help myself. Simon Miller for cameo videos, personalized videos. Did a wedding anniversary today. That was very fun. Big Cartel and ProWrestlingTees.com/Simon Miller for merchandise. That was probably just a big old rant, but who cares, man? It's Friday, and of course we have a pay-per-view this weekend. I'll see you soon.